want to start off some of the questions. One of the interesting things, and you mentioned this in the trajectory of the Nature Conservancy in the region, is the fact that we have been on the ground and in the water for 25 years. And the progression, the arc of the development of our programs in places like Palau and Micronesia, Indonesia especially, where we've been on the ground the longest, has progressed from really specific, very community-based creation of capacity, conservation action planning, and the like. So we set a real strong foundation in a lot of these countries. What can you sort of describe, what happened as a result of that? I mean, can you clearly trace the policy results, for instance, in the Micronesia Challenge or the Coral Triangle work, or other sorts of the fisheries piece? Can you trace the successes of those initiatives back to that foundation?
Absolutely. I can use, for example, the Micronesia Challenge. We started the Micronesians and Island Conservation Peer Learning Network in 2002, and it was originally a sabbatical project of Audrey Newman, and she was looking for somebody who could take her work of how adults best learn and how we can ramp up conservation. We were looking at a very large footprint and very small program, and how can we really scale up. And Bill Rayner embraced the idea and said, let's try it in Micronesia. So in 2002, the group, we had only a couple of local conservation NGOs in the region that we'd been instrumental in helping to set up. And through that group, the network of conservation leaders grew. Then when the Micronesia Challenge was announced, and we needed to get signatures and buy-in and really figure out what the leaders gave this big lofty goal, and then we had to figure out, okay, how do we implement this on the ground? And MIC was instrumental in all of that, and really was able to be that network to get everything moving and off the ground very quickly, so we could show some really quick early wins, early successes, and keep the leaders engaged.
Yeah, and in the Coral Triangle, similar kind of sort of basis there, multiple countries.
Yeah,
complicated politics.
Complicated politics, but I think our long-standing relationships in Indonesia were critical, and certainly our long-term relationships in Papua New Guinea and Solomons were helpful to really build that, and they continue to play a role. Our staff are on the national committees that make decisions directly for the Coral Triangle Initiative.
So when we started the learning network in Micronesia, did we have the notion in mind of scaling it up, or was this just sort of the way we were thinking, okay, here's how we can add value in this place? Did we have a notion?
No, we absolutely had a notion. It was tied to, we had been working with our partners to do their, under their commitments to the Convention on Biological Diversity, they needed to have an idea of where they would be protecting things to fulfill those commitments. So we helped them do a blueprint using TNC's Conservation by Design, our eco-regional assessments, and we pulled everyone together. And we knew that we had this vast area not yet covered, and how are we going to do it? And we didn't have the capacity, nor did our partners, so we tried to build it. So Bill absolutely saw MIC as that way to extend our footprint.
Right. That's I think it's missed a lot, and when people think about the transition and the arc of TNC as a whole, people generally say, oh well, for many years we did community-based conservation or land deals or local-oriented, community-oriented work. But I think in almost all the cases that, especially in this region, all of that work was essentially a necessary precedent or necessary precursor to this larger policy work.
Absolutely. We would not have a tuna program if Chuck Cook had not gone to Palau, created those strong relationships. We now have Noah Idong working with us. That would not have happened without those long relationships.
And I think that's one of the distinguishing characteristics of TNC, in my mind. That willingness to make long-term investments in people, both TNC people and partners, in places that then ultimately change the narrative for those places and beyond.
Absolutely, and we have examples of it, like the current Minister of Environment in Palau.
Yeah.
That was a young up and coming conservation planner that we hired,
Yeah.
Amy Sengabao, and now he's Minister of
Yeah.
Environment.
So Palau is sort of the first place we touched down in Asia Pacific 25 years ago, and as we're in our big 25th anniversary
Yeah.
celebration, I've been telling that story more and more of the story of that long-term commitment leading to bigger policy arrangements. I wonder, have you done any work in terms of the economic, sort of tracking the economics of countries and communities in the Pacific that are doing, great jobs of conservation versus not so great jobs of conservation? Is that something we should be getting into?
I think that's something we should be getting into. We have not. I think there are things we haven't done, but things like FAO and others have done.
Yeah.
That, you could probably then add the conservation layer and look at.
Yeah.
We do have, in fact, she just came on board about a week ago. We have a new economist joining us in Micronesia, Kiara, and she will be primarily focused on the climate adaptation project.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely think we have to continue to make that economic case.
Well, there's at least some correlations,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so if you look at someplace like Palau and you compare it to someplace like FSM or Vanuatu, or places that don't have the robust, conservation ethic and communities that we've helped develop over the years. Marshall Islands, I think, is probably a better example where there isn't as much of an investment over the years. Look at Palau. Palau's approaching a middle income status
Right.
in a country. It's it's just put in place a marine sanctuary over a chunk of land that's about half the size of the United States. So this is very different sort of development track than a place like the Marshall Islands or Vanuatu or other Pacific Island countries.
I agree with you, but I think it's a little too oversimplified because Palau is also a lot closer for tourism and things, So I think
Easier to get to.
I
There's
think
other factors.
there are other factors involved, but I agree with you that I think there's probably something there.
There ought to be a way to tease those
Yeah,
factors out
exactly.
and understand
Yeah.
what the contributors are. Tell me a little bit. We've started in the last few years to work with women's groups in the region and empowering women's groups to take control over the natural resource base, like sea cucumbers or other seascapes and corals. Tell us a little bit about sort of what's the theory behind that. I mean, we're not a women's empowerment organization, but we've clearly found a sweet spot where we see the value overlapping between conservation and women's empowerment.
And I am not the best place to speak to this, so Robin and Laura and others on the team are better placed, but I would tell you from my standpoint, there's a couple reasons. Most of the Pacific Islands have a matrilineal they're matrilineal societies. So even though the men are leader, the men become the chiefs, the women, it's through the women's line, and the women have a lot of behind the scenes say, certainly in Micronesia I can speak to. And I think that, globally there's a recognition that women are more attuned to trying to take care of the family because, they have a very strong vested interest in that. And that by empowering them, you are in fact empowering the community a bit more, and you probably, and it's not that we haven't found incredible male champions, but I think that what sets this apart is that, and actually there's like studies that show that women will make longer term decisions usually. Men will take the instant gratification, like little kindergarten boys will take the M&Ms today and little kindergarten girls will take the M&Ms tomorrow. And so it's, I think there is something to the idea of the work we're trying to do and really that foundational long-term sustainability. There's a way to tap that through the women. And I think the women's groups are strong. So we're tapping into something that already exists and just bringing a different focus area.
Well, it's such a fraught topic, right? The male-female dynamics and discrimination and sort of the way we do this, and we tend to kind of ignore the basic biology, much to our detriment, right?
Yeah.
Both in the communities we work in and even within TNC. But I think that's a fascinating story about leveraging difference, which I know you guys have spent a lot of time on in the last few years, and where we've got some great, I think, leadership both in the region, but also new leadership in TNC with Heather Wishing coming on board. Can you speak a little bit to the pilot project that you guys did on difference in Micronesia?
Sure.
And we've got I think a hot topic workshop coming up next week,
Right.
Which unfortunately neither you or I will be there.
We'll be in Solomon.
We'll be in the Solomon Islands. But can you speak a little bit about another example of that kind of leveraging difference and sort of looking at the fact that, okay, women in the Pacific Islands, matrilineal societies, different way of looking at the world, and the conservation value to that. Can you speak a little bit to that and other?
Sure. It was a wonderful opportunity to be the pilot project for Asia Pacific and work very closely with Heather. We chose to do sort of a two-pronged project where we were trying to learn about different ways to leverage difference in our team, ourselves, and then we also were just at the right time launching a new peer learning network for the finance, operations, and administrative folks in the organizations where we work, because we were noticing that many of our NGO partners especially were starting to struggle as they grew and started to receive more grants and receive more resources, and they were having issues with being able to be financially accountable, whether they had the right skills or training or software. And so we thought, okay, let's try and create a network just specifically focused on those guys. And it turned out that the vast majority were women in those roles in Micronesia. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic. And they're often the women, their style is often behind the scenes, and they're often caregiver, taking care of the logistics, taking care of both the family at home and then also the family, the organization where they're at. And so having Heather come on board at that time and so we could focus on both was really incredible experience, and really helped to get people away from just thinking that leveraging difference is gender or just culture or that it's also socioeconomic class. It's how much knowledge you have, how much experience you have, what's your management style, what's your background, and just having this group together. And Heather was able to come out several times as we pulled that group together, and just really getting everyone to see each other in those various ways, and to then implement that. We learned that some of the team really struggle with conference calls because they're not oral learners, and so we had to figure out ways to make sure things were visual or to make sure things were hands-on. And so it was a really rich experience. And then our own the Micronesia program, Heather came to our retreat and was able to really to bring the whole group together about recognizing how your team is so much stronger if you have a variety of types and differences and styles and things. And I think we all have been there where you get frustrated, like, oh, why can't I work with so-and-so better? Or what, and it's recognizing that they're not trying to make your life miserable. they're just trying to, they're seeing a problem in a different way.
Yeah,
exactly. And that if you see that as a value and a strength, it's a very critical part of being successful.
I mean, those of us who've been sort of forced into different situations, or being, living in as a, Westerner in another place, or living as as an Asian in North America, I think you get sort of pushed into figuring that out kind of by trial and error and implicitly, and some of us are better than others at it. I certainly don't claim any expertise. But the notion of kind of specifically and systematically saying, okay, I'm going to take control of my own learning on this and figure out how I can do a better job of leveraging this power that lurks beneath the appearances of all of us.
Yeah.
Is really a pretty interesting kind of future track for us.
Absolutely, and you know, for my own learning and growth in this area, I think has made me a better fundraiser. I'm more able to talk with like presidents and leaders because I'm always trying to think, okay, how are they seeing a situation? I'm trying to
Right.
see it from different angles.
Right. Communications is not just about repetition, it's about figuring out how you're being heard and how you're being perceived.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think people are curious about, you mentioned some of the stats and numbers around the Pacific, and it's a third of the planet, and you know, we've got these ambitious fisheries goals. How does this all fit into the big global goals of TNC, the global priorities, global solutions, and the global marine team? How do we how does this all roll up, and how you know, first, how does it all roll up, and then second, I wanted to ask you how integrated we are with the global teams and the regional groups and the state chapters and whatnot.
We are really well aligned with the global marine. I feel we're a key component of the fishery strategy. Both coastal fisheries and the tuna program is a big alignment of multiple levels within the Conservancy. We've also been very well aligned with, you know, we've been a key component of the Reef Resilience Network over the years, helping that start and roll up and expand. And we certainly, you know, our protected areas work has been really, we're a key project for the Mapping Ocean Wealth. We're looking at how are we mapping fisheries productivity as a way to also continue to build those networks and to continue to build commitment from leaders of like, this is how economically viable this is. But we're starting to align better with climate, but I think climate within the organization has also shifted and changed and worked, and we primarily fall out on the adaptation side, not the mitigation side, and so I think we've continued to show ways that communities can enhance their resilience and really try to address these impacts, and we've worked with partners to come up with some pretty innovative tools in that sense. We're starting to align now with the mining and the extractive industries. We're becoming more of a development by design pilot side, and we worked a lot with Michael Looker to help align better with that. But certainly, global marine is our natural home, natural fit. Yeah.
And over the over the last 10 years, how has the donor community been thinking, or how has their thinking changed or shifted with respect to marine?
Well, it's interesting. So there, kind of throughout both the donor and the conservation side, there's been a shift from just putting all your eggs in the marine protected areas basket and looking at the fact that even with well-planned, well-enforced protected areas, you may still have fisheries impacts and fisheries issues, and that you really need complementary fisheries regulations and policies to complement those protected areas. So that's been a big shift. And then the other shift I see is a shift of many of the donors to really you know, a more return on investment approach and really tangible results that are incremental, that they can see along the way, that you can really show. And that brings its challenges, because some of the work we do doesn't always go in, you know, beautiful little increments. So, but in general, I think, you know, we're really well positioned. We're a super trusted partner of the Australian government. We're anticipating that same relationship with the New Zealand government. The U.S. government sees us as a safe pair of hands, I think Michael likes to say. Yeah. So I think we're actually quite well positioned. Right.
And then in terms of actually getting huge global results done, you know, over the next 5 years, of course, this campaign, what do you see, you know, happening that's going to be noteworthy, you know, kind of at that global level and at that global scale? If you could make predictions, or what's your biggest hope that some of the stuff in the Pacific kind of takes off, and what would that be? What 2 or 3 big things that you've got aimed for?
Yeah, well, one of the big ones is that we've successfully implemented some tuna reforms, and that they're being taken on board by the other parties to the NARO agreement, and that this is becoming, the way forward of sustainable tuna. I think that would be very exciting, and I think we have ambitious goals and a great team, and I think we probably can get there.
Yeah.
And I think also within that is this idea of these really big ocean commitments, and really demonstrating, in Micronesia and in Melanesia, we have demonstrable, scientifically published information showing recovery of hawksbill population over a 20-year period. We're seeing that the actions in the Micronesia Challenge really are resulting in results, and I think that will continue to show the world that yes, these were valid investments. It takes time, but they will in fact result in benefits.
Great. Those big sort of wins, I guess, if you will, again, on the back of that long history of local involvement and engagement, are an impressive sort of thing to shoot for. But you feel like there's a relatively clear line of sight between where we are now and where you'd want to be in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I do. I feel like it was a bit of a baptism by fire for all of us.
Yeah.
It was, not gonna lie, it was a pretty rough year this past year. But I feel like we really have solid strategies. We've got, we're building the right team. We're nearly there. And we have awesome partners on the ground that, I do feel like. And I think we are really, I think what is really great is having Lois really focus on broadening the leadership and what it means to be a leader. And that has really brought exposure both ways, exposure to the team, by the state programs, by the global leads, and then vice versa. We get, they get to see who we need to align with better. How do we need to manage up?
Let's shift a little bit to conservation by design. I know you probably paid attention to the process and been engaged in it a little bit.
I've been engaged in it.
And the original way we looked at the world was essentially, here, look, there's the world, this globe. Let's cut it up into ecoregions, and then let's figure out what the special places are in each ecoregion, and then let's design strategies to tackle those problems. The underpinnings of which, we've sort of based all our actions on those underpinnings and that science and that geographical look at the world for the last 20 years. But now we've got a new tool or set of tools that includes that geographical look, but it's also addressing, sort of what are the big issues and how do we tackle those issues and go through the results chains and understand the root causes of some of them, and then try to project out and put ourselves in a facilitating solutions to those problems. It seems like the tuna issue, the tuna program, was sort of conservation by design 2.0 before we even started down that track.
I think it's fair enough.
People said, hey, look, there's a big issue, the tuna fisheries crashed in all the other oceans. The only remaining healthy tuna fisheries are in the Pacific, the Western Pacific specifically. How do we get our head around this? And we had a lot of discussion over the last 4 or 5 years around this. Is that your perception?
Yeah,
as well?
I would say, I honestly hadn't thought about it until you just now said it, but it's probably a great example of what now we're calling strategy mapping, which is basically, here's where the important things are, here's where the enabling conditions are best, here's where it's ripest, let's start here, and here, and so I think you're right. I think we kind of intuitively, and that's, I just came from the Conservation Coaches Network rally in Barcelona, and that now has 39 partner entities as part of this group, and I presented on our CBD 2.0, mainly the key components that are new, and it was absolutely 100% embraced that yes, this is the right direction. And in fact, like Greening Australia is also thinking about strategy mapping in a different way. So clearly that's important. Clearly the benefits to people and really having thoughtful social objectives aligned with conservation objectives, that's a key component. And then building the evidence base is really important.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's just want to make sure that folks know we'll take questions now. We've got about 20 more minutes, and love to have your thoughts and questions from the audience through chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question through the conference call. Probably better to try to just type it in or send an email to CV or a text or something to CV, but it probably best through the WebEx. But if you can't get through the WebEx, then please do unmute yourself and pipe in. So we'll wait, and I'm imagining some questions will come in a second. But as we're waiting, what's your sense, Trina, of some of the most remarkable places that you've been to in the Pacific? Where would you advise, if you had sort of one trip to go on in Asia Pacific, what is the most remarkable place you've been?
So, well, and my apologies to Melanie.
One place.
No, I know. And my apologies to Melanesia because I haven't been there yet. Like next week, I'm so thrilled to be going to the Solomons. So, but in terms of my experience in Micronesia, I had the amazing opportunity from 2006 to basically 2005 to 2008 to do these incredible marine surveys across the states of the FSM because we knew we had some gaps. And one of the most amazing trips was to this tiny atoll. It's actually not tiny. It's actually a large atoll with very few people on it called Nulu Atoll in Yap. And it still, to this day, is one of those places where at one point I jumped off the boat and landed in a huge school of bumphead parrotfish, just a roving herd. It was like buffalo from Colorado. Like they were just chomping away, and I'd never seen anything like that. I was just stunned and awed, and just it was one of the most phenomenal things. And the community there had basically set under protection 90% of their atoll, and it's like 16 miles across. And then they were going to live sustainably on the 10% nearest where they live. And there's only about 20 people on the atoll. But just turtles coming up to you, curious, looking at you, giant clams laying just right on there's one species that sits on the sand, Hippopus everywhere. It's just amazing. So Nulu Atoll.
Yeah,
go to Nulu.
Or don't go.
Or don't go, yeah, exactly.
Like doing some strategy mapping on all these TNC staff who are showing up to
Nulu.
To Nulu.
It's very hard to get to.
Let's see, what in terms of donors, where would you say that is that a sort of place that can exhibit our work really well? Like where would you go to take a donor in Micronesia, Melanesia, that would say, okay, here's where here's what we're doing here. It's about this, it's about that. It's really successful.
Well, Palau has been a great showcase for us, and it's a really easy way it's an easy place to get to, it's an easy place to take donors. We have fabulous partners on the ground, so that one really is easy. When we've paired Palau and Yap, that's been an interesting trip, because Yap is a bit smaller, it's a little more traditional, and that's been a really useful tool. But it's all, again, all of them are amazing. I think I'm dying to get to East and West New Britain and Manus and that area. I've never seen it. I know it sounds breathtaking and phenomenal, and we're going to see the Arnavans next week. So I think that it's a mix of figuring out what I found have continued to find challenging is a lot of the donors we really want to get to these places are like, oh no, I want to be in and out in 4 days.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, because these
possible.
are remote islands. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's a big challenge for all of us in Asia Pacific. It's even taking our China board, getting out to some of our work in Yunnan or Sichuan or Inner Mongolia takes a day or so of travel, and that's off-putting for a lot of folks.
Yes.
Do you have any sort of notion that cities work would ever pop up as part of the work you would do in Micronesia or Melanesia?
It's a good question. I mean, Moresby is a big city.
Yeah.
You know, it's not somewhere we've really thought about working,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it might be. I don't know. And New Zealand is, as it comes online, there
Yeah.
there might be something there. But even New Zealand is really,
Yeah.
I think it's fewer people than Papua New Guinea.
Right.
So, we're not really city folk.
Right. It's a rural atmosphere.
It's a laid back. Yeah. Yes.
What other big challenges that do you have in the region? What are the other sort of things that keep you up at night, you're worried about, that you need help with? What are the big...
I'm not going to start with money, but I'm going to end with money. But capacity is always an issue because we want homegrown leadership and capacity, and these are relatively small populations.
Right.
Papua New Guinea is the highest, and so you know it's somebody explained to me one time. Andrew Smith used to live. He's married to a woman from Yap and lived in Yap for many years, and was always frustrated that people were like, why aren't the islanders doing this, that, or the other? And he's like, there's 10,000 people, half of them are children. You've got, you know, people that care about or that have a scientific bent are often the doctors or going to something else. So getting from that pool and really finding those conservation champions is a challenge,
Yeah.
and then maintaining that pool. And sadly, we lose these champions.
Yeah.
You know.
What's interesting though is the flip side of that is the opportunity is that so few people control enormous
Yes.
chunks of the planet,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, these are massive tracts of ocean and atolls because of the EEZ, the Exclusive Economic Zone, and the way that they're able to track themselves around the.
And you have direct contact with
Yeah.
leaders. It's very true. On the money side, honestly, and we've had long chats about this. We are not a wealthy division, and we constantly struggle to build reserves, and we did usually start every year off at zero or nearly at zero. And so figuring out how to raise those lightly restricted funds, how to be sustainable is a challenge that keeps me up at night, but I feel like there's hope. I think we can work through that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about money a little bit, because it is interesting. So I have this funny multiple experiences in TNC, which are, you know, starting in Colorado and you know, working with the state chapter, and then working with the Mongolia program to help them start up from zero, and then working with the China program and moving them from a, you know, 90% US and European funding model to a 90% Chinese-based funding model. They're all really different situations, and obviously, as you know, you say, the Pacific program is a very, it just isn't local. There aren't local resources to manage on that front. And I know that that, you know, from the very top, from Brian and Mark and Lois, you know, all the way down, you know, through all of us, we're very concerned about that, trying to figure out ways of freeing up funding, and part of that will, you know, come through hopefully this campaign process, through better integration with the global priorities, but it will be, you know, continue to be a struggle. So it's a challenge. You know, we will continue to try to make it meet that challenge. Can you talk a bit about the community's work that we're doing around mining in the Solomon Islands?
Yes, I can, but I'm just becoming more apprised of it. But we have been working really hard to train a network of community facilitators that can go out, and so a lot of the work we're doing there is really raising the awareness of here's this economic opportunity that, if done well, can bring resources, but if not done well, you will there will be consequences, and so really helping people helping communities have the best available information so they can make informed decisions. And so we definitely have a great model of, it's not us going out, it's us training facilitators to go out and talk to the communities.
Yeah, it strikes me it's pretty similar to the situation in Mongolia maybe 10 or 15 years ago, before the big mining boom there, where, you know, they didn't have the local knowledge to understand how to plan, you know, do ecological planning. They didn't have the technical expertise to deal with the big mining companies, and so but they knew they needed to develop, and that, you know, if that's what you've got, if you've got lemons, you're going to make lemonade. If you've got minerals, you're going to mine them, and you want to do it as sustainably as possible. So it seems like there's probably a decent blueprint to learn from, you know, Inktuya and Gala,
Right.
Tugi, Bayar, and the Mongolia team on that front. It's I mean, it's just such a similar situation. I keep thinking that we need to do a better job of sharing lessons across the platforms.
Absolutely. And on that note, we are also trying to share the fisheries work across. So
Yeah.
Rick is going to come up and visit Stephen and look at some things. You know, so I agree with you. I think even though it's challenging logistically and costs of travel, it's really an important way to get to share the information.
Right.
And it's often really great to bring partners with you and have them see what we're doing and talk directly with community partners in
Right.
other locations.
Right. All right, we've got a question from the audience again. You co-authored recently a research paper on scorecards for measuring effectiveness. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it works and what that means for us?
Yes, I can. And so that particular paper was part of what's called the Micronesia Challenge Measures Working Group. And when the Micronesia Challenge was launched in 2006, we helped to facilitate a big planning meeting, and within that we realized we'd need sort of these subgroups that would work, that would be empowered by the leaders to communicate. We have a steering committee that's sort of the governing board, and then this measures working group, because we knew that to continue to get resources to continue to achieve the goals, the ambitious goals, we had to be able to track progress and show defensible results. And initially, when we did sort of a very kind of coarse scorecard for the leaders, we had just sort of percentage under some form of management. But that often got conflated with, oh, they've achieved it. You know, it was like, no, we didn't say they're effective yet.
Yeah.
We said they're under some kind of legislative mandate or community mandate. So this particular effort was a lengthy, many meetings and a core group. We have some wonderful scientists at University of Guam, Peter Hauk. We have Yim Gulbu at Palau International Coral Reef Center. Stephen's collaborated. I brought in some of my expertise to really think through, okay, and then working with the local monitoring guys on the ground, what is it we can do we can sustainably fund that gets us the answers we want, that we can say then in the literature, X% of the Micronesia Challenge is effectively conserved. So we came up with this condition score to look at things like fishing pressure and land-based sources of pollution impacts, and then overlaid with the health of the fish and the health of the resources. I think the Mapping Ocean Wealth Fisheries Productivity Mapping will also start feeding into this. So we're basically, the score is a threshold of, okay, there's, you know, these X% of these metrics meet this threshold. And that, yes, we can say in this moment in time, they're effectively conserved.
Yeah. Well, that correlation between kind of ownership and control of these, you know, ocean landscape or oceanscapes, and the work we do on land with, you know, with protected areas and, you know, land trusts and the like, seems like there is some very, you know, similar kind of lessons to be learned on that front.
Yes.
So one last question I think we've got before we
From Eddie. Eddie!
before we have to wrap up. Eddie Game asks, can tuna be exploited sustainably, and what do you see as the keys to doing so?
I do think it can. I think certainly many of the species can. I'm not sure about bluefin, but I definitely skipjack, I think, and yellowfin and big eye. We have some. Many of the best minds have thought about ways you could do this sustainably. Now, this will take, I think, having had these great meetings in Hong Kong set up for me and talking to people, it's really going to take a huge partnership of the Conservancy and others, because you got to tackle it from both ends. You've got to tackle it from the management and supply end, and then you have to tackle it from the demand end. And the demand is just insatiable right now. And so we have to figure out a way that you can somehow get people to shift their thinking on what they're going to buy and what they're going to eat, and how much they're going to eat all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, it's interesting working here in Hong Kong and talking to bankers and people in the finance industry all the time. They really quickly catch on to the sustainability of tuna. You know, tuna is basically like a bank account. It's generating a certain amount of interest every year, and if you take the interest, well, you'll be okay. You can maintain the tuna fishery. But if you start eating away at the principal, if you start writing checks that to reduce the total biomass in the ocean, you're pretty quickly running into trouble in terms of ability to deliver protein to people. There are some experiments on the tuna aquaculture front,
Yeah.
as I recall too.
Yeah, and I think there's even been, like, because of course it's the feed that's also a problem. You fish down the chain,
Yeah.
and you're getting you're taking too many bait fish and others, and
Yeah.
and I think there's been some positive results on high protein, high fat algae that would be potentially more sustainable, but
Right.
aquaculture that's a whole other can
It's
of
a
worms.
whole other can of worms. All right. Well, hey, let's wrap up. What if you could kind of close, Trina, with a couple of questions or sort of a few statements on this front. What inspires you most in our work?
Absolutely, hands down, the people, the partners we get to work with. Like when you're just sitting, talking with communities and asking them what they care about, and seeing the work that they're doing, and oftentimes they're just volunteering their time, and then even the whole team, like our team and TNC and our colleagues, and I've had a wonderful week here in Hong Kong, and just getting to. So for me, it's really learning about seeing that light come on in somebody's eyes of what they get excited about. It really inspires me.
And then over the next 25 years, so let's just assume that you and I'll be here in 25 years.
I won't have my bakery making
for Asia Pacific. What would you like TNC? Complete the sentence. In the next 25 years in Asia Pacific, I would like TNC to blank.
I would like TNC to have. Gosh, it's hard to say because Bill used to say we're working our way out of a job, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that conservation is a sort of endpoint or exit strategy.
Yeah.
I feel that, like you said, we're building for the long haul. It's a marathon. This is a lifetime commitment. So what I would like though to see is that TNC is a valued and trusted partner, continues to be, but we even have so many more partners out there. That everybody is really bought into this idea that conservation is essential to the well-being of the planet. We have to do it.
Well, fair enough. So thanks for all of you for joining us. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you liked the program, let your friends know. It'll be up on YouTube, I think, shortly. CV will send out a note, or Asmar will send out a note on that front. It's great to have have this forum and the ability to have these conversations. When Trina and I see each other at senior managers meetings, we often have these kind of conversations, but they're not captured for the rest of you. And it's the way that I think that hopefully you've been able to see the way that she thinks about the world and the way I'm thinking about the world, and how TNC is progressing. So. Hope you enjoyed it, and join us again next month for another version of Breakfast Briefs from the Prosperity Millennia Plaza here in Hong Kong.
In lovely downtown Hong Kong.
Thanks.